smile. This is cool.
All right, welcome back, guys, to Husbandhood, a collaboration of husbands addressing the lessons of singleness, fatherhood, and marriage. Since Christ is the central to success in every aspect of life, we will be offering biblical perspectives when navigating these topics. So, without further ado, here's episode 2, Sacrifice and Submission. So, as you know me already, Daryl, I got my partner in crime on the other side, Todd. Go ahead and, introduce
Hey, what's
yourself.
going on, everyone? As Daryl said, this is Todd. I'm so excited to be discussing this topic and just ready to get going.
Yeah. So sacrifice and submission, man. I mean, first and foremost, those two words, they already sound scary. I don't know about you, but they sound very scary. I mean,
Yeah, man. I mean, I think it's bold for us to come out and jump right on those two words because they carry a lot of weight. They make some people feel a little some kind of way. But the reason why we chose that is because we're looking at the roles of the husband and the role of wives in a marriage, and so we wanted to just kind of get right to the root of it.
yeah.
There's a reason why we use those words. We're going to be looking into the word. So yeah, we were like, hey, we're not going to run from it. Let's go ahead and talk about basically those two roles and how they interact
Yeah.
in a marriage.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. So I guess when you think about it, sacrifice and submission, I kind of, in a way, I kind of feel like, should like one party do more than the other, or does it like when you say sacrifice, my thing is biblically speaking, what is sacrifice? Like what are you sacrificing, or what aspect, what does that look like?
Well, I mean, I think we got to look to Scripture. That's the
All right.
first place that we have to look to. Are you reading it? Am I reading it?
Hey, you know what?
We're gonna go ahead
Honestly,
and
I was actually curious to see what you had because I know I got me a couple of myself. But I am curious to see what you got because I'm pretty sure we could probably go back and forth on some scripture that'll really get things going.
well, I'm not trying to get myself into too much trouble, but yeah, I'll let you, I'll throw Ephesians your way.
All right. All right.
But let me pull out one that I thought was really cool. It was found in Titus. Um,
Ooh, Titus.
yeah,
I ain't gonna
yeah.
lie. I haven't read Titus, so this is gonna be interesting.
So yeah, it says it's just some of the admonitions that Titus has. So
Mhm.
it says here in verse or chapter 2, verse 5, to be sensible, pure workers at home, kind, being subject to their own
Mhm.
husbands, so that the word of God will not be dishonored.
Mm.
He just threw
Okay.
it down like that.
And so, out of curiosity, are you talking about wives at that time, or are you talking about husband, or is that both?
He's talking about wives. He is talking
Okay.
about wives.
Okay. So I can probably hear some women probably get mad at us right now because they're like, "Oh, so you're just gonna start with the wives?" No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Uh, it's funny. I like that because I've always, as a husband, I've always wondered, when we talk about wives submitting and stuff like that, and we've have other scriptures that back up that, you, you kind of ask yourself as a husband, if she's submitting to me, what requirements do I have to continue, so where she will continue to do that, because we know with men we value that respect, and I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of things on that, and I know women require that love. So what do you think? I mean, actually I probably could just start off with mine because I love yours. But I like the I think it's Colossians 3:19, and it basically
Okay.
talking about husbands, love your wife and never treat them harshly. And the thing is that, as husbands, we like to be that tough guy, that, I get the big piece of chicken, this and that. And sometimes that doesn't roll over as being loving towards the wives. And so I like how you started
hmm
off with the submitting so that, God's word. And on that same note, we understanding that we need to love so that they will submit. What do you
Right.
think about that?
And I think that's the important piece to both of these sides. You know, when we talk about submission and we talk about, the admonition for the men to
Mhm.
sacrifice, the
Yeah,
model ultimately comes from God.
yeah,
It's not like a submission as far as like, I'm man, listen to
mhm,
me. That's the way things are meant to be. It's more so like, I believe that God a
mhm.
God of order. I believe that He has a plan for everything that He does and everything that He says. So
Yeah,
if He said something, if He sets an order in place, there's a reason behind it, even if we can't always understand that.
yeah,
So, as a fairly new husband, just about
mhm.
to celebrate 2 years of marriage,
Oh, that's coming up,
it's
isn't
not
it?
like I'm pulling from years of experience
Yeah,
in that way. But I also know that as someone who is looking to study the word and be true to that,
yeah,
um, that's something that even when we were dating,
yeah,
Amy challenged me to
mhm,
that she wanted me to be the leader.
yeah,
So with that, if you want me to lead,
yeah,
there's gonna have to be some trust in the leadership that you're calling
yeah,
me to do. It's I think a lot of times when we put these tasks on things, it's okay. I want you to be a leader, but now I'm going to fight you the whole way. It's like, okay, no. If you want me to be a
yeah,
leader, you kind of got to let go. You got to
yeah.
relinquish a little bit of that
That
control.
that
You
sacrifice,
know,
basically, right? That
well,
sacrifice.
yes, there's sacrifice certainly on that end, and I think for the husband, there,
Mhm,
we are still in ways to submit to our wives as well. There's
mhm.
aspects of that too, but I think ultimately our submission is to Christ,
Yeah,
because and so if we're being led correctly, there
yeah,
that order makes sense.
yeah,
Our wives submit to us, our children submit to us, we submit to Christ, and if we
mhm,
follow that order, it falls into place perfectly. But when we try
yeah,
to start, mixing and matching stuff, that's when you see a lot of turmoil in families and in churches and stuff like
yeah.
that. So
So I guess one of the things that that I hear, and it's funny because I mean, I don't know if you have any friends. I know I have a couple that if you
you don't
tell
think I have any friends?
no, 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 no. I meant to say in the aspect of because like I remember having a conversation with one of my friends about just wives giving them the practical or not practical, but giving them the biblical reason of why wives are submitting and husbands are loving, and how it all works, but they could not wrap their head around the fact of, why should I submit to my husband? You see what I'm saying? And at the
Hmm.
same point, they almost looked at it as a weakness. You see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And so the thing and I guess here's where I'm getting at with this is that as husbands, you know, I don't know about, your wife, but I know sometimes with my wife, submitting is easy, but sometimes submitting almost looks like they feel like there's a weakness there because they're not receiving the love. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is where's that balance? Like, is it just all the time? Is there like you should always submit? You should always like, how does that look?
I mean, this is gonna ruffle some feathers for sure. I personally believe that is essentially the only time that submission should not be in place is if there's going to be sin involved.
Yeah.
If the husband is leading in such a way that is going to cause sin, then I
Hmm.
believe that submission is voided, because
Yeah.
obviously God is not, he doesn't know sin, he does no wrong.
Hmm.
So why would he want us to lead our wives or vice versa into a
Hmm.
sinful situation? So
Yeah.
beyond, you know, leading into sin, I believe that, you know, the order of that, the wife submitting to the husband, is almost absolute.
Yeah.
And some people, and again, I think I can make a biblical case for that, because it doesn't
Hmm.
give any caveats to that
Yeah.
submission. It doesn't say submit to your husbands in these circumstances. It just says submit to your husband. It says submit.
Yeah.
So unless you can point to, conditions of that, I
Hmm.
believe that that's pretty much absolute. Again, with the
Yeah.
exception of sin. Um, but I think to say that it's somehow weakness to me is also shows a little bit of lack of trust in who God is, right? Because
Hmm.
if he set this into place,
Yeah.
then he has to have a reason behind that. You know,
Hmm.
I don't think that he did it just to be like, because I know a lot of people say, the Bible, is misogynistic, i.e., hates women and stuff like that. I don't believe that, because on the flip side, we
Hmm.
can talk about the other side of that, where it's said to men to basically give their lives up for their
Hmm.
wives. And I think
Yeah.
that's where that sacrifice piece comes in. Because leadership, I think a lot of
Hmm.
times people look at leadership and thinks that it's like this just amazing glorified position. Leadership comes with some
Yeah.
risks. It comes with
Yeah.
some, and I also think too, part of the reason why, this is opinion. I think
Yeah.
part of the reason why God put this in place is because it flies in the face of what we would want to do naturally. I don't
Yeah.
think naturally men are in the business of sacrifice, at least entirely. I think we
Yeah.
can be very selfish. I think we can want things our
Hmm.
way. And so to sacrifice, I think, kind of causes us to submit in that way. And I
Yeah.
think submission is not natural for many women because,
Yeah.
not trying to
Yeah.
denigrate anybody's wife, but how many of us have had to fight, not fight, fisticuffs, but,
Yeah.
certainly, it seems like almost every decision there's a tug of war, right?
Yeah.
Or if you say
Yeah.
something, it always seems to like be
Yeah.
met with
Like.
resistance. So I think
Hmm.
that's part of the thing too, is like, are you willing to submit to what God
Hmm.
asks of you, knowing that your
Yeah.
nature is basically going to fight against that?
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you said right there, because it's almost like you have to be intentional.
Yeah.
You can't. It's not something. I can't speak for everybody, but it's not something that's just um, in us, in the sense, like you said earlier, we're literally fighting our flesh every day, and so we wanting to be served, if that makes sense. We want to be served all the time, but the object is for us to serve each other. And I think I remember either reading or hearing somewhere where the object is to be to outserve each other, which is funny.
Mm.
Because I think about my own life and how you get home from work, you're tired, you get into wherever your rest spot is, and then so your wife is like, can I go out to the car and get something real quick? And in your head you're like, just got off work, I'm tired, I want to sit down. But at that
Right.
moment you're like, okay. And that's where that. And it's funny because sacrifice and submission, I know it probably sounds like we're looking at it man woman, but it goes both ways, which is interesting because at those moments you're actually submitting to your wife and you're going, you know what, I'm going to quote unquote take this sacrifice and just go out there because it's for the better of the relationship.
Yeah.
And I just love, because you said something other earlier about oh man, I think I lost my train of thought about it. But uh the cool thing about when we talk about God and love, it's kind of funny how it's two, God is love. And when you think about how a husband loves his wife, and it always says that he wouldn't harm himself, I think a lot of us don't understand that aspect of it because, your wife. I feel like I'm gonna take another flip side of this. I feel like wives want to submit to their husbands. I feel like most majority of women have no problem submitting to their husband, and I feel like the problem sometimes can be is that is the husband loving the wife enough for her to continue to do that because of the fact that relationships and just marriages in general, it's a constant thing. It doesn't stop. You can't just say, "Oh, I love her till I get married, and I'm gonna stop doing everything I'm doing." You see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And so when I think about just the like our topic, we probably said it 20,000 times, which is funny: sacrifice and submission. I think about how hard it is. I mean, because some of us men, we kind of really don't know unless we're reading or even have examples what love really and truly that unconditional love looks like. I feel like women sometimes are kind of, you know naturally kind of, I mean, if you think about it, they submit to their kids, they do all these things for their friends and stuff like that. But I think about myself, like where I learned love from. My mom loved me to death, my dad loved me to death, but I never really understood how to unconditionally love, my spouse, in the sense of the way God wanted me to do it,
Yeah.
and
I
so
also, if I
yeah, go
can
ahead.
interject,
No,
I
no, go
also
ahead.
believe, kind of going in line with what you were talking about with um, because again, we're seem to be harping on the submission piece, but I think it's
Hmm.
important because um, you have you ever been in a situation where someone had to let it be known that they're in charge? It's
Yeah.
like, uh, what is my, what does this name tag say? I'm the manager, blah blah. And you're like,
Hmm.
okay, we get it, dude. You're the leader. Like, you don't have to
Yeah.
keep them. And it almost makes you balk at their authority because you're like, okay,
Hmm.
well, do you not just trust in your own leadership
Yeah.
ability that you have to keep citing your role? And I think
Yeah.
that's the tough, that's another tough thing for men is
Mhm.
I think yes, intuitively there is an aspect of women and wives that are willing to
Mhm.
be submissive.
Yeah.
And again, people have such a negative connotation of submitting, but
Submission.
let's be
Yeah.
honest, we submit ourselves to a lot of things. We
Mhm.
so it's I think the main thing is anytime we're commanded to do something, and it's like, but
Yeah.
I think the main thing is if you are having to walk into your marriage or walk up to your wife and always be like, okay, I'm the leader here, blah blah, and always
Yeah.
having to feel like you have to like lay down the law. There's probably
Yeah.
an issue with you trusting yourself to be a leader.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've been really trying to do, as opposed to being like, always referencing back, hey, you asked me to be a leader, blah blah. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
you know what? Sometimes let me just observe or make sure that I'm doing what I should be doing. Because if I
Mhm.
make sure I'm doing what I should be doing, then I'm probably not going to have to always cite the fact that I'm the leader or trying
Yeah.
to like throw the word at her and be like, "You're supposed to submit to me," blah blah. Because most people, if they have any type of backbone, that's going to cause a defensive reaction
Yeah.
anyway.
Big
But
time. Yeah.
if I am walking confidently because I know that I'm following in the footsteps that Christ would want me to do, that I'm walking his
Yeah.
will, I think that submission piece is just gonna like fall in
Yeah.
place.
Almost just yeah,
So
it's almost just
yeah,
naturally happen.
right.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think about when Christ was basically recruiting the disciples, he he was basically like, hey, follow me. He wasn't like, I am, he didn't have to make this
Yeah.
grand proclamation. He basically
Yeah.
was like, "Hey, follow me," and people were like, "Oh, okay." There's something about
Yeah.
this guy that like I need to figure out what's going on. So I
Yeah.
think that's an example that we really should look to is yeah, sometimes you might need to just like lay down the law,
Mhm.
make a decision or sometimes. But I think some of it too just is, hey, if you're doing what you should be doing as a husband, it's
Yeah.
probably not going to be as hard of an ask for your wife to kind of,
Mhm.
follow suit with you.
So I got a question then for you. So do you feel that do you feel like one not necessarily precedes the other, but if you do you feel like if you're loving your wife, kind of almost what you said, if you're loving your wife unconditionally, that it's going to it's almost a given that it's just going to naturally allow her to submit where her not even knowing it. You see what I'm saying? Like, do you think it starts with you loving your wife, in the beginning, so that she will begin to submit easier? If you get what I'm saying.
I mean, I think so. I think it's
Like if
tough,
you yeah.
because I think at the end of the day,
Mhm.
we really can only impact our own behavior.
Yeah.
If you go into any type of relationship, especially a marriage, and your
Mhm.
goal is to try to influence or even, you know, force any type of behavior
Yeah.
out of your spouse, you're
Yeah.
probably going to be in a long road of disappointment. So
Yeah.
I think not even focusing on the outcome of what you want from your wife is,
Hmm.
am I doing what I know that I should be doing? Like, and from
Yeah.
a realistic, like, uh, perspective of like looking at yourself. And
Yeah.
so I don't even know that you need to worry about, okay, I'm going to do these actions so that my wife does,
Hmm.
XYZ,
Yeah.
and more so be like, I'm going to do these actions. I'm going to do my best to lead well. And
Hmm.
if I have a wife who is also committed to, you know, doing what she knows that she should do, then I feel like
Yeah.
that should fall in line. And that's, some people might, oh, that's a very idealistic way to think. But I genuinely believe that if you have married well and you
Hmm.
have married someone who is as committed as you to, like, you know, doing what God wants, or being
Yeah.
informed by what God wants from their lives, that's how it's going to work out. So
Hmm.
I like what you say, the whole trying to like love, love your wife well, love her
Hmm.
unconditionally, even in those moments where you may not like them very much.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
there's been plenty of opportunities where you have, uh, maybe experienced something to be like, man, right now I just really just want you out of my face. but but even in
Yeah.
those moments,
No, I
like, I have to
understand.
take a step back and be like, you know what? Like, this is where love matters even more, is when I don't
Yeah.
necessarily like this person for whatever
Yeah.
reason, because
Hmm.
love is not based on like your emotional standing.
Feelings. Yeah.
It is, love is a sacrifice.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
is, this, I don't know if you can
Yeah.
find it in the Bible, but I believe love
I think it's John.
incorporates sacrifice and
Yeah.
submission as well. Because,
Yeah.
so I think
Yeah.
that's, maybe tying it into our title as
Yeah.
we keep saying it. But I do
Yeah.
think, love incorporates both of those.
Yeah. I like what you just said earlier, and actually, I have the scripture right here. I think it's John 15 and 13, where it says, "There's no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friend." And of course, obviously, you can replace that friend with your wife, considering the fact that, you know, you consider her your best friend, as most
Right.
people would say. So
Right.
I couldn't see that not being a possibility, which is cool. Man, I mean, everything you're saying. I mean, it's like solid gold. I mean, wish I could make money off of it, but I can't. uh, but but I hear us talking about a lot of ways to do that and stuff like that. Um, not all of us believe.
Mm,
Let's be real. Not all of us believe. And so if you're someone coming into the relationship and a lot of us have really and truly no clue because we've either been into a lot of relationships or this is our very first one or we're looking for the ideal relationship or something like that. And a lot of times we don't even understand what um the relationship is supposed to look like in general. Like
right.
if you tell me I'm supposed to love, well, yeah, I love. I'm loving hard. And yeah, I'll cook, clean, and do all these different things from a. Do you believe that it's deeper than that? I know that sounds weird after everything we talked about, but it's like these people who are not believers that be like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that says that, but you know, does that really apply to me?
Mm.
You know,
No,
I mean,
I
I
get
mean,
that. Yeah, because,
mhm.
again, as we talked about when we launched this, yes, we're going to be talking about things from a biblical perspective. But our hope is
Yeah.
that, um, people can find value from this, even if they aren't, calling
Mhm.
themselves Christians or anything like that. So, yeah, if you're looking at things from a non, you know, biblical base, Christian
Mhm.
perspective, I still think there are values, to pull from, the idea of, um, being mindful of what your spouse needs.
Mhm.
I think one of the things, this is a book, it's written from a spiritual perspective, but, it's, I believe, a Christian book. But, I still think there's values that people can pull from it, and it's called Five Love Languages. And I think
Mhm.
that without going too in detail with what the book talks about, I
Mhm.
think the main crux of what that book is looking to convey is are you paying attention to how your spouse communicates, um,
Yeah.
and the ways in which they are basically uh, asking for you to demonstrate your love. Because you could be doing
Yeah.
all kind, like you said, you could be cooking and cleaning, and the person that you um, are trying to care for might really just need your attention. They might just need you to
Hmm.
give them like just a little token of
Yeah.
your affection. Like the cooking, they might like, okay, that's great, but I don't feel like you're valuing me. Probably what's going
Yeah.
on is they're needing you to express your um, your care for them, your love for
Yeah.
them in a slightly different way. So what I would encourage people to do is, regardless of if call yourself a Christian or if you're atheist
Yeah.
or searching or whatever, is if
Hmm.
you value this relationship that you call a marriage,
Hmm.
just be mindful of what the other person is
Yeah.
needing and expressing to you. If you
Yeah.
don't care about that, then in my mind, I'm like, why are you married? Because,
Yeah.
like, I think the ultimate thing of any type of relationship is, if you're going to be involved with that person, is you should be mindful of what that person needs to maintain a healthy relationship. So
Yeah.
that would be
Yeah.
what do you think?
Hey, honestly, I've definitely read that five love language, and I agree. Like, I agree 100%. I know both me and you. I mean, first and foremost, we want everyone to come to Christ, so let's make sure everybody knows that.
Yeah.
So, if you're really thinking about marriage, I mean, to be honest with you, that was definitely designed by God first and foremost, and so it would only make sense to listen to what he asked you to do, and so that's why we wanted to let you know. But I mean, I love because I'm a quality time kind of guy. I
Hmm.
don't really require much as long as
Same.
you're there. Quality time, and so by me getting that, it makes it easier for me to love my wife. Because she's just there spending time with me, and so I know. Men should really look into that. That's an avenue for loving your wife that you won't understand. It'd be almost not ludicrous, but it would be more impactful to know how to love your wife, if that makes sense. In our
Hmm.
minds, we think loving our wife is buying, like you said, buying her a rose, or saying I love you, which saying I love you always works. Don't get me wrong on that. But like, a lot of times it could be, like you said, the quality time or physical touch, or there's little different things. But diving deep into that is just further connects you with that, with your wife, so that you are able to create that relationship where submission and sacrifice is almost next to none.
Hmm.
It's so natural that you don't even think about it. You're more, almost like I said earlier, you're more ready to serve than anything. Hey babe, can I do this? You see your wife, she's walking a little different. Babe, can I massage your feet? Something wrong? Hey, can I draw you a bath? Can I do something? And if you, like I said, if you know your wife's love language, a little card here and there, if she likes, the little words of affirmation, or just whatever it is, those avenues of loving your wife will just unlock so many doors. And I think a lot of us kind of forget that. We kind of, that's one thing. If I could reach out to everyone, and me and you probably even talked about it, it's just that constant dating your wife.
Yeah.
I think, without sharing too much of your personal life, I think you had a game night with your wife the other night,
Mhm.
and of course y'all kept score. I'm not going to tell it out loud because I don't want everybody to
Yeah,
think,
don't
if
put
you
that
can.
out there.
But it's like,
I got my one. I got my one.
hey, trust me, I play Monopoly with my wife, and I'm still reigning champ. I'm trying to keep it that way, but my wife is very competitive.
Yeah.
So I mean, there have been times where I'm pretty sure boards were close to being flipped over, but we're not going to talk about that right now. That's another episode or whatnot. But just that, the overall companionship, just learning how to love your wife, and although the title does says that sacrifice and submission, just what that look like, it actually disappears the more you get into what God asked you to be, to where you don't even recognize it as that. I watched you, Todd, many of times, when you're with your wife, and you're loving on her in the sense of getting things done, creating avenues for her to do other things that she want to do in life, and going places, and you just see the love there. And honestly, when I look at you, I don't even feel like you're even sacrificing anything, and she just naturally submits. And so and I know I'm talking more to you like I'm like some type of counselor now. I'm just letting everyone know that it although it sounds really hard and harsh, like it's just like, oh man, when I have to sacrifice, I mean, I can't play the game, I can't go do this, I can't hang out with the boys, but it's so much easier than what it sounds. And I don't know, I don't know, maybe you might think it's a little bit harder, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think it's both and right. Like if it was
Mhm.
just a walk in the park, then
Yeah.
I think we would have a lot more successful marriages, right? So there is
That
an
is true.
aspect that does require effort, but I also think too, if you are truly committed to
Mhm.
a lasting marriage, a God
Yeah.
honoring marriage, then that is something that you're going to put in that work, and it's going to become more it's going to become more natural, right? It's just like when you're
Yeah.
doing anything. At the
Mhm.
beginning, you're gonna be like, I'm never going to get this. But if you put in the time, you put in the effort, you work at it,
Yeah.
you're going to start to grasp the you know the intricacies of the game, if I can use like a sports
Mhm.
analogy, right? Like
Yeah.
most people don't step on a court or on a field and automatically are like the best at it. Maybe you have some
The
natural
gate.
athletes, but
Yeah.
there's still probably going to be a learning curve for you. So just like with marriage, if you put in that work, if you put in the effort on the front end, you're gonna and again, this is me casting for, but I've also, my parents have been married 50 years. Her parents,
Oh,
I think,
wow.
are about to celebrate 40 years. We've got a lot of legacy to pull from that we can kind
Yeah.
of like look to. And so, what I've observed is now it does seem effortless. But I've talked to
Mhm.
my parents. I know that they went through some stuff at the front end, and
Yeah.
so I mean, both you and I, we got married during COVID. I don't want to
Yeah.
get too much into like because I know we want to talk about some of that in a later episode.
Yeah.
But we've already hit some trials, on the front
Yeah.
end of our marriages, and I know you're going to talk about some of the things in your past and also in another episode. But
Mhm.
um, I think that's only going to serve to strengthen what we're
Yeah.
building if again we are committed to the goal ultimately, and that's protecting that covenant. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, again, I agree that the ease will come, but I definitely you got to put that
Mhm.
work in on the front end, or
Yeah.
it's probably not going to work.
And that's what I like about you, Todd. You're down to earth. Yeah, you're 100% correct. Honestly, I kind of want to ask you a question because as we talk, and I don't want it to sound like we just have these perfect marriages. Because marriages, like you said earlier. So, what has one thing that you've had to quote unquote sacrifice that was really difficult? Like, I mean, you don't have to go into details if it's something you're trying to keep, but what is something that you had to sacrifice that was really difficult that you had to be intentional on for your wife?
I mean, I'm still working on it.
Mhm.
I would say there's two areas. You know,
Mhm.
Actually, there's three areas. So yeah, we're not gonna dive too far into there, but I
Yeah,
would say the
so
very
just one example.
yeah. Oh yeah.
You
Then
know.
then yeah, I'll just give one. I'll give a fun one
Okay.
because we're gonna talk. There's a lot we got to talk about. Um, you mentioned
Yeah.
the video game thing, right? Like she even made a
Hmm.
comment like after we got married. She was like, when you
Hmm.
said you game, I didn't think you game that much. And in my mind, I'm like, you have no idea. Cause like if you met me 15 years ago,
Yeah.
I was doing like all night Call of Duty sessions and stuff. But
Yeah.
um, I definitely had to pull back quite a bit on the gaming side of
Mhm.
things. And, I for the most part, I did that willingly, and it wasn't a huge like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
you're keeping me from it. But there are definitely times where I'm like, man, especially now that I have a kid, my
Mhm.
time is not my own, basically.
Yeah.
So that definitely was something that, as a single guy with no attachments, I could play when I wanted to
Yeah.
play. I could do what, and so having to continue to navigate that and negotiate my time, you know,
Yeah.
uh, in the past, I didn't have to ask somebody, is it okay if I hop on the
Yeah.
game? But now
Yeah.
I gotta ask that question, So
Yeah.
that was,
Oh,
like I said, I
hey,
want to keep it light, but that was definitely something I'm still having
yeah.
to learn how to sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, I completely understand that. And I do. Yeah, that was by far one of it was definitely I wouldn't say a challenge in the sense of like a hard thing, but it was definitely oh no, it was a challenge. Let me quit lying. It was a challenge. It was I mean,
You can
I
be
well,
real.
anyways,
You can
so
be real. Yeah, but
it was I
what
mean
about?
me and you could talk about it. Go
Yeah, I
ahead.
was like, did you have a different sacrifice you wanted to talk about, or?
I mean, I could almost use the exact same one you have, but I think work kind of like intertwined with that, so it kind of made me have to give that up. But honestly, I think mine's was more of less. So I like to call myself a man of many talents, but never mastered any. You know, and so one of the things that I always struggle with was, and I still struggle with now, and it's like a huge sacrifice for me, is that when my wife comes to me, not necessarily with a need, but a concern, for me to always jump to try to fix it. Like that's like just
Mm,
being that guy to just listen, Like I can sit there and I'm like, oh, I give you 8 good things that you can do to fix that, and uh, it has been a huge because I mean, a lot of my friends, when I was a little bit younger, they would always come to me, hey, Daryl, man, how do I do this? How do I do this? And I'm fixing like, oh yeah, good. And then when I get to my wife, a lot of times it's like, I just want you to hear me, not really, and that can be a whole nother topic for another
right.
episode because of communication, but I mean, it's really a big, big sacrifice for me because, you know, I I always feel like I have to try to fix something. And so learning to just kind of quiet myself and just be there, really allows my wife to open up and be able to, just be herself and be able to not always you know come to me and I'm thinking like you can fix this easily, and it's just I mean I could talk to you all day about that because that's a very very hard one for me,
Yeah.
so
All right.
uh
So the other day I sent a video to you, and I kind of wanted to kind
oh
of
yeah,
touch on
yeah,
that before we look to close things out. It was by
yeah.
a guy named Doug Wilson, and he was talking about guilt, responsibility, and
Hmm.
some people like Doug Wilson, some people don't. We're not going to really dive into
Yeah,
that, but
yeah.
I did want to kind of talk about that topic that he discussed. And what we're going to do is we're going to share that video in the description of this episode. So
Hmm.
if you guys want to check that video out, but I just
Please
wanted
check
to,
it out, definitely check it
yeah, I
out.
just wanted to get your thoughts on kind of what he discussed in that video.
Yeah, so I definitely checked the video out. Honestly, I didn't know anything about the guy until I saw the video, the clip that you gave me, and a lot of people have their views of him, but I like to, me and you, we dig in deeper to try to figure out what he is talking about, and I just like how what he talks about is kind of more of less like um or what I got from it. Let me describe it that what I got from it was that you know when there are errors in the relationship, whether it be sin or there's a problem or something like that, uh a lot of times we have to learn to take our own responsibility for our own responsibility for our own actions, let's put it like that, in the relationship. But what I noticed, which was interesting, what he said was that it's up to the man though to take responsibility over what is like the dynamics, I feel like, of the relationship. So although let's say your wife, is, I don't know, I'm just throwing something out there. Let's say, you know, you guys are just always arguing. You just feel like you're always arguing and stuff like that and stuff like that. Well, although she may have the temper and she may be having the words, she's going to necessarily have to go before God because of that. But overall, we're supposed to be more of in charge of kind of not necessarily controlling it physically, but like kind of like controlling controlling it in the sense of, are we, what are we doing to minimize that or help that or fix that or whatever it is that we need to do. And so I kind of like, because I mean I can go into like, infidelity about it. Yeah, the woman might get in, the woman's got to pay or the man's got to pay for if infidelity happens. But overall, we are in control of the relationship. God's going to look to the man and go, hey, I had you over, I had you stewarding this relationship, and how have you managed that, and I mean, I notice it's probably going to cause an uproar all over the place, because it's going to be like, how dare you say that, this is my fault and that fault. And I encourage people to understand, it's not about the fault of who committed,
Right.
whatever. It's it's not like things happen overnight. Let's be
Right.
real. Nothing
Exactly.
happens overnight. It's not like, if you get into an argument with your wife and it blows out to something else, to where you got, it's not like it just, it's not like whatever that atmosphere in the household, let's put it like that, happens overnight. These are a combination of things. And how are you, as the man being the leader, how are you hearing from God to fix or not fix? I hate using the word fix, because fix almost to me sounds like something's
Right.
broken. But I want to say, like, how are you, the best way I can word is stewarding. I like that word. How are you stewarding the relationship and the way that God is asking you
Right.
to? And so that's what I got from it. I mean, it was probably what I think it was like 10, 15. I don't know, probably was a lot longer than that
Yeah, it
minutes.
was like
And he
almost
had a
11
lot of
minutes.
nuggets
Yeah.
in there.
I,
Yeah.
yeah, again, there was a reason why I shared that video, because it resonated with me. It made me think about
Yeah.
a lot, again, as a fairly, young in years husband, I'll say it like that.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the thing that I got from it is, it's on, like you said, on the one hand, we all hold the guilt or fault for the
Mhm.
wrongs that we do, the sin that we commit. But in
Yeah.
the family setting, the responsibility falls on the husband, on the dad,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
that's one of the sacrifices you have to take on as the head of the household. Again, a lot of times
Yeah.
people look at this whole leadership thing and think it's all smiles
Mhm.
and cupcakes and sprinkles. And no, there's some really hard things to have to manage when you are the leader, when you're the head. And I
Yeah.
mean, he the thing that resonated with me and just really made me sit back as he talks about, he goes back to Adam, and then he juxtaposes that with Jesus, and he talks about what would what Adam did wrong was, it
Mhm.
was kind of twofold. One, he ultimately should he because he was present there when Eve was
Yeah.
speaking to the serpent. He should have
Yeah.
intervened before
Mhm.
things even took place. And then after they
Yeah.
took place, he should have, when God, was asking who, was responsible,
We're
Adam should have stepped up as the
the
head of
leader.
that relationship.
Mhm.
He should have stepped up and said,
Yeah.
"Hey, it was my bad. Like I should have, like
Mhm.
you told me, because that was what God command
Mhm.
told Adam, and Adam related to Eve.
Mhm.
So he should have stepped
Yeah.
up, and so Adam failed in
Yeah.
his responsibility, whereas Christ
Yeah.
actually lived the perfect life. He did no wrong, and yet he took responsibility for everybody's
Mhm.
sin, and so he basically
Yeah.
righted the wrong that Adam created, and actually took
Yeah.
responsibility for something that he had no part in. And so, wow, I was like, man,
Yeah.
like there's so many times where in a relationship where I feel like I've been slighted by my wife, or maybe she's done something, and I want to kind of like, you know, maybe in my little petty spirit be like, "Ah, ha, ha,
Yeah.
I told you you shouldn't have even been doing that." And the
Yeah.
real legitimate response of a loving husband should be, wow, like how can I help avoid that, or what can I do to make sure that that doesn't happen to my wife again? Like that
Yeah.
feeling of like anything that happens or that goes wrong in a relationship, um, no, I'm not going to say like, oh yeah, you never do wrong. You're never going to take blame for anything. No, but it's like, wow,
Mhm.
what am I lacking as the head of this home that
Yeah.
led this to happen? And that goes all the way down
Yeah.
to your children. Again, we're all
Yeah.
individuals. We're all, we make our own decisions and choices. But I think if
Mhm.
we as husbands and we as fathers really take that ownership of saying, hey,
Mhm.
at wherever my family goes, if there's a foot astray, then I need to do some reflection as far as like, what can I do better to ensure that that doesn't continue or doesn't happen again or whatever. So,
Yeah.
and again, it's not saying that the person who did the wrong is not at fault at all, but it is, you taking ownership and, like you said, stewarding. We are steward, like
Yeah.
God has appointed us stewards of each of our little,
Mhm.
domains that we call
Yeah.
families. And if we take that seriously, if we want to shepherd our wives, our children well, then we've got to be willing to take on that responsibility fully.
Yeah. Yeah, I just love what you said there, especially about the leadership, because it's interesting how us men want to be the leaders of our household. Like, I mean, you could be like, "Ain't this ain't gonna happen in my house," but in the head, in your in the Bible, we have to understand what that leadership
Yeah.
means,
Yeah.
in the sense of like, I mean, like literally, you're in charge. God's going. It's almost like when you're a supervisor, or maybe not even like a coach. Yeah, the coach, they might, or the supervisor, yeah, they might see the players. That, oh, this person did this wrong, this person did this wrong, but they ain't going to them first.
Mm-mm.
They going to the supervisor and the coach. Hey man, what you
Right.
doing? In their head, you're like, I ain't on the field.
But
What are you talking
you
about?
hold, that's your
And so
responsibility. Yeah.
yeah, and so when you start to look at it like that, when you're like, hey, and I don't want anyone to sit here and think like it's a child thing. Oh, I got to babysit. No, 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 no. What I'm saying is that God has put you in the leadership role over the wife and the family and stuff. And as a coach or leader, you're grooming for them to become better versions of themselves in the sense of for the Lord. And if you don't understand that, hey, when somebody in your group or in your family is not doing right because you're not, because I like what you said earlier. You said Adam was present. See, you got to ask yourself, are you
Yeah.
present? Are you
Right.
even there? Are you there watching to make sure? Because I guarantee you, if your wife is having a bad day and you're there, you're
Right.
gonna see it. If your kids are having a bad day and you're there, you're going to see it. Now, I know there are some circumstances where maybe you work a lot or something like that. I understand that. I'm not really talking to that. That's another episode, trust me, because we will definitely figure that one out. But are you taking those times, to look and see and navigate and figure out, oh man, you know what, this ain't right, that ain't right. But on that same note, understanding that if things get out of hand, God's looking at you like, hey man, what's going
Yeah.
on? Why is this out of order? Why is that out of order? I called you. I like saying that I called you to this position to steward, them in the direction that I would like you to. Because I mean, honestly, our wives are not ours. Let's be
Right.
real. Our wife's not ours. Our kids are not ours.
Right.
They're the Lord's, and so we're just stewarding them the way He asked us to. And so that leadership role is so. I mean, I remember a class I took, and it talked about teachers. That as a teacher, and you can do teacher, you can almost do leader. You know, you're almost judged more strictly. You know what I mean? It's not like you can just sit here and be like, whatever. No, I mean, that's just not how it goes. And so I just love like that whole it's funny because I know a lot of people probably take what Doug Wilson said out of context but I just love the way he put it because it makes so much sense. It's almost like you say, you look at it and you go, wow, if things are going, crazy in my household, what am I noticing this? Am I doing something about it? Or I'm just sitting here going, oh, you know what, my wife and kids are
Right.
crazy. Like that just doesn't
Yeah,
work.
because let's think about it this way, right? You certainly, like, if your wife is doing well and getting accolades, or your kids are, get, you wouldn't have any issues being like,
Mhm.
like claiming them, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
how are you going to get the
Yeah,
glory, but not like be looked at if
yeah,
something's going wrong? Like that's not how it works.
yeah,
You know, you can't be coach of the year and then you go 0-16 and be like, it was those players, like no. People be like,
yeah,
yeah, you
exactly.
were
Yeah,
coach of the year, but what went wrong here? Like, so because
yeah,
I remember
yeah,
who was it? Uh, I think it might have been Dennis Franchione. Uh, I think
mhm,
he like coached Alabama to like a 12-1 season, or like he had like a really good record at
yeah.
Alabama, came to A&M and just like tanked, and a lot of people
Oh,
were
man,
like,
yeah,
yeah, he was just playing with, someone else's players. And so, so it's like, yeah, at some point
yeah,
you've got to prove it yourself, right? Like, so,
yeah.
I might have gone a little bit off the reservation with that analogy. But
Yep.
maybe I just wanted to rag on Dennis
No,
Franchione a little bit.
he wanted to bring him up. I was like,
Sorry,
so that's what
Dennis,
you were
if you're
talking about
listening
earlier.
to
No,
the,
you're
the
good. Yeah,
podcast, like no hard feelings. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, man, I encourage everyone to listen, watch that video. And here, the other thing I would
yeah,
love to encourage people to do as we look to wrap up is one, you know, especially for those who are, professing believers, get into your word first and foremost. Make sure you're
yeah.
studying,
Big
especially
time.
if you are a husband and father, and even if you're single. Like, there's nothing that's going to prepare you better than like just digging into God's word. If you're not a
Yeah.
believer, why not? Let's talk. But no, but
Leave comments below.
yeah,
No,
but
kidding.
I still encourage you guys, even if you aren't believers, like if you are married, if you are parents, or if you're looking to be married, just be aware that there is a weight, but it's a beautiful type of weight that comes with being, a
Mhm.
husband, being in a marriage.
Yeah,
So don't
facts.
don't be scared of the
Yes.
responsibility. Don't be scared of the idea that there's going to require some sacrifice and even submission on the husband side. But
Yeah,
it's a beautiful melding marriage when
yeah,
you make that work.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you couldn't have ended it better than that, man. Yeah, I agree 100%. I love being married. I'm not, I tell people all the time I love being married. Um, and yeah, I mean, are things challenging? Yes. Are they impossible? No. Again, like you said earlier, believers, guys, take this in and learn from it. I mean, if you're not loving your wife, you're not being able to submit to your husband, maybe even come together and ask those questions of why not, maybe there's something right there that needs to be addressed, and then
Yeah,
again, maybe even maybe surround yourself with a certain community, of husbands and wives so that you can even bounce ideas out of them, because I mean if you are already around a community, they probably can tell you where your blind spots are,
yeah,
and hopefully that's with love. And so yeah, I mean, sacrifice and submission, it again, to me I feel like it's just love and respect.
yeah.
You see what I'm saying? That's all it is, love and respect. You know,
No doubt.
I mean, I know it sounds like I'm like, oh, why do you just call it that? But just love and respect, and the next thing you know it, everything is just. I mean, God's going to get the glory, and you're going to watch things just unlock in your relationship. So, yeah, I had a great time talking with you, Todd.
Yeah, so
You know,
everyone, thank you so much for joining us for episode 2, Sacrifice and Submission.
yes, sir.
We just want to say
Yes,
God
sir.
bless, enjoy yourselves,
Yeah,
and we'll catch you guys on the next episode.
yes, sir.